رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، يقول الحافظ النووي رحمه الله تعالى في رياضه في الباب الأول منه، باب الإخلاص وإحضار النية: وعن أبي بكرة نفيع بن الحارث الثقفي رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: إذا التقى المسلمان بسيفيهما فالقاتل والمقتول في النار. قلت: يا رسول الله، هذا القاتل فما بال المقتول؟ قال: إنه كان حريصا على قتل صاحبه. متفق عليه. This narration in the first chapter of Riyadh al-Salihin, continuing where we left off, the ninth narration is on the authority of Abi Bakr, Nufay' ibn al-Harith al-Thaqafi, radiyallahu anhu. He narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, if two Muslims meet one another with their swords, meaning in battle, meet one another to fight with their swords. So here we have two things. Number one, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam describes them as Muslims, but then he says with their swords. And swords here articulates intention. What do we mean by that? Meaning that a sword is not used to clobber someone, it's not used to harm someone, it's used to kill, it's used to take life. That's what it's designed for. Therefore, the intention of these two is clear. We wouldn't have in a Muslim court a person use something like a sword, in our modern time, a handgun, something that is lethal, something that is intended to kill, and have them say, well, my intention was just to scare the person. My intention was this or that. Because as we said before, the principle that Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah taught us in Ar-Risala, he says, we mentioned this a couple days ago, the principle is that intentions are only taken into consideration in ambiguous situations, unclear situations, situations that it could be this was what the person intended or this is what the person intended. Not in a situation where there's a situation that is explicit, right? So for instance, let's say a person used a club, a billy club, or a whip, let's say. This is something that doesn't usually kill, right? This is something that is used to inflict pain, but not kill. Or let's say, for instance, in modern times, a taser. A police officer using a taser, for instance. Well, sometimes people die from that. It's not always. As a matter of fact, it's very rare. Or, for instance, a beanbag. Right, not at you, I'm not shooting you, but a beanbag, right? A beanbag is used usually in a shotgun, and it's used in riot control and stuff like that. Or let's say tear gas that's used to control crowds. Things like this, right? Can it take life? Have these things taken life before? Yes, the human body is very frail. It can be very frail, right? And just like a person can survive 10 rounds from a machine gun by some miracle, a person can also die from falling off a footstool. So, if a person were to be tased, let's say, and then the person died, and we were in a situation of judgment. The officer then comes and says, I didn't mean to kill the person. I only meant to subdue them. You know, they were acting crazy and I was just trying to get the situation under control. In this case, we would take into consideration the intention. We'd take into consideration his intention. Why? Because it's ambiguous. It's ambiguous. The act itself is ambiguous, right? But let's say a person uses a handgun, or they use a club and it kills someone by accident, or uses a whip that causes a wound that gets infected that later claims the person's life, right? This is ambiguous. We would take into consideration the person's intention. However, let's say a person uses a gun, a handgun, and let's say they shoot someone in the leg. I say, well, I was just trying to subdue them. A handgun is it is used only with the intention to kill, right? Anywhere you shoot in the body. That's what it's for. It's designed specifically for that. And so the claim of my intention is not relevant in this situation. And so the same thing here in this kind of narration. He says, إِذَا الْتَقَى الْمُسْلِمَانِ بِسَيْفَيْهِمَا تَثْنِيَ لِلسَّيْف. A safe, a sword, is used to take life. It's not used for just general fighting or, people having small disputes or, right? When a person uses a sword, this sword has been designed and crafted and honed, and it's also been trained with to take life. So a person couldn't come and claim, well, I didn't intend to kill him. No. Death is the expected result of using a sword. The Prophet ﷺ articulates this meaning here in this narration. Why? Because he says, إِذَا الْتَقَى الْمُسْلِمَانِ بِسَيْفَيْهِمَا. ولم يزد على ذلك. لم يقل صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا التقى المسلمان بسيفيهما وأراد قتل بعض مثلا، أو وكل يريد قتل صاحبه. ما زاد هذا. لماذا؟ لأن السيف لا يستعمل إلا في القتل. And so he didn't say if two Muslims meet one another with their swords drawn and each intends to kill the other. He didn't say that. Why? Because a sword is only used for that purpose. A person could survive a sword attack, right? Just like you could survive a handgun attack, but that's not what it's designed for, right? That's an outlier. Most usually, when you speak about someone that's been struck with a sword, you're speaking about a person who's dead. You're speaking about someone who's been shot with a gun. You're speaking about someone who's dead, right? And that's why in our language, we use shot and dead synonymously, right? We say, well, he got shot. What's he got shot? He's dead. That's what we mean when we say that. Speaking about someone who's dead. And so, the Prophet ﷺ didn't add to this. And why do I mention this? Because in Islamic law, homicide, rather we should say, homicide, which is one human taking the life of another, homicide is three types in the Islamic court. Okay? You have قتل الخطأ وقتل العمد وقتل شبه الخطأ, right? أو شبه العمد. So you have homicide, which is accidental homicide, right? Because in English, in American judicial system, right, the word homicide literally means a human being taking the life of another human being. And it could be accidental homicide, it could be intentional homicide, premeditated homicide, right? Murder is only intentional. Person intended to take the life of another. Sometimes they call it manslaughter. So we have this gradation in Islamic court. So we have homicide, which is accidental, so accidental homicide. We have intentional homicide, and we have unintentional homicide. Unintentional homicide. So what these three things, they make a difference in the ruling. They make a difference in the ruling. We have one who shoots another person with a gun. We have one who's playing with a gun and it goes off. We have another who uses a taser on someone. These are three different situations. They're not all the same. The Prophet ﷺ didn't consider them all the same. However, in this narration, we see that the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us that if a person uses a mostly lethal tool to take the life of another, unless there are some very strong evidences that this was a horrible accident, immediately this is considered to be intentional. Intentional homicide, murder. And if it is premeditated murder, this person is executed no matter what the situation. Premeditated murder is always an execution. There is no, we forgive him, even if the family forgives him. Because premeditation in murder articulates malice and articulates a person who is out of control and needs to be protected, needs society to be protected from him. كما رجح شيخ الإسلام ورجحه الإمام مالك بن أنس. So the point here is that the Prophet ﷺ, with regards to intentions, we see even in the way that he speaks, he is using the tool and not elaborating on the intention. If two Muslims meet one another with their swords drawn, then the killer and his victim are both in hell. Notice here he says the killer and his victim. He doesn't say, and they both intended to kill each other. Because now a Muslim judge would not take into consideration a person's intention. Why? Because the sword is a lethal weapon. It's used to take life. No one can come and say, well, I just meant to cut him up a little bit. I just meant to cut off an arm or a leg, right? And you hear this from people who are not acquainted with violence. For instance, people will say, well, the police, they should shoot him in the leg, instead of shooting him in the chest or something, should shoot him in the leg. It's a gun. It's designed to kill. Anywhere you get shot on your body. That's what it's for. This is a silly proposition. We don't have any such thing as shoot him in the leg or shoot him in the arm like in the movies. This is silliness. And so the Prophet ﷺ judges both of them in hell. Both of them, the killer and his victim, in hell. We'll continue this tomorrow, inshallah. Wallahu a'lam. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa jazakumullahu khairan.